Over-the-top action, spectacular effects, 60 FPS gameplay. These are the hallmarks of Devil May Cry, a series that returns after a long absence this year with DMC5. And can you believe it? It's been 11 years since the last main entry developed by Capcom. A whole generation has passed in that time. We're staring at the tail end of PS4 and Xbox One's lifespan, in which we've already seen ports of Ninja Theory's excellent Devil May Cry reboot and DMC4. But for longtime fans, DMC5 brings us back to certain traditions of in-house Capcom development and a return to the style of the last numbered entry. We're still a little ways off its March 8th release, but we do have a demo today, playable on Xbox One and X. That at least gives us a sign of how performance is stacking up so far. The engine at the heart of Devil May Cry 5 has a bearing on what we can expect. In as many series entries, the engine has changed 3 times. We've had empty framework in DMC4, a scalable tech that worked on everything from Xbox 360 to iOS, right down to Unreal Engine 3 in the reboot. But today, well, we're looking at the RE engine's handiwork, having debuted in Resident Evil 7. It's a known quantity, but for Devil May Cry 5, it's really a fascinating choice of engine for a couple of reasons. According to Capcom, a push for more photorealistic materials is a big incentive for the change. Just one pan around Nero right at the start shows cloak texturing is more precisely lit, with full cloth physics to boot. It's a lovely effect, and DMC5's characters are possibly the most detailed aspect of the game. Environments also make use of a more grounded, lifelike material overall, backed by dynamic shadows from spotlights. You'll see a lot of overlap with Resi 7's post-effects pipeline too. The film grain is put aside, but we keep the chromatic aberration, bokeh depth of field, and a likeness to its anti-aliasing method. All of this creates a very processed picture that makes jagged edges harder to catch. It's a stark contrast to DMC4, for example, which on PS4 and Xbox One surprisingly ran with no anti-aliasing whatsoever. And then there's the performance angle. Resident Evil 7 was engineered with PSVR as a core focus. Even going back to that terrifying kitchen demo, it forced Capcom to build environments with scope to always run at 60 FPS per eye. It's still one of the very best VR experiences out there, but in DMC5's case, there's no sign yet that VR support is planned. Instead, using the RE engine gives Capcom a strong starting point to target 60 FPS on console. The optimization is proven to work well for Jaguar CPU-based systems, though it's not entirely there based on this demo, which we'll talk on in a bit. A quick note on what we've got in our hands then. This is likely the same build as the Gamescom showcase we covered last year, only this time we have access to the base Xbox One as well. It takes Nero through a demon-besieged London, a 15-minute sample ending on a fire-spewing Goliath boss. You can tell it's meant for the show floor too. Dying at any point infuriatingly sends you all the way back to the beginning. Still, there's plenty here to show how the game's scaling from one extreme to the other, from base Xbox One to the X model. First up then is the resolution. For X hardware, we've already counted a native 4K at Gamescom, and from what I can see so far, it's a fixed number at 3840 by 2160 this time too. Again, there is difficulty parsing the exact numbers from such a heavily processed image, but based on multiple samples, it looks like we're getting 4K. Now, if we consider that in the context of Resident Evil 7, that's a big achievement. DMC5 is far more extravagant with its particle effects in combat, and yet the resolution stays the same as Resi 7 on X hardware. We have more enemies, and the central character is on screen at all times too. It might have been fair to expect a rebalancing in the overall resolution to make up for it, but instead it does stay in place. As for the regular Xbox One, well, this again shows Capcom sticking to a template set by Resident Evil 7. In the demo, it's a native 1920 by 1080, though some buffers do run at a lower resolution. The bloom effect, for instance, seems to reveal more jagged edges. Impressively though, this game does still look incredible, even factoring in the limits of the base machine. It falls in line with DMC4 and Ninja Theory's reboot when it comes to that 1080p output, though going by the frame rate in this demo, it could be a stretch too far for the base Xbox One. Any other differences? Well, sadly, X's higher RAM allocation isn't tapped into for better textures as far as I can see. All the assets on environments and characters is consistent with base Xbox One, and I'd imagine that'll hold true for PS4 consoles when we get to them. Potentially, there is an improvement in texture filtering at least. There's also a difference in shadow quality, and so you get more refined, subtler ambient occlusion on Xbox One X. The net result is it looks slightly less overbearing, less thick on X, but it's not a major difference. Otherwise, we're looking at very minor changes, and really, it's the 1080p versus 4K divide that stands out most. There's lots that could change by release. If this is indeed the Gamescom build, that puts it at least half a year old, compared to what we'll get at launch in March. I'd love to see X used more extensively then, but that aside, the engine is scaling neatly to both machines. If there's one issue that needs knocking on the head by March though, it's the frame rate side of things. Whether that's the base or X models, you'll notice 60fps isn't quite a consistent number. Let's boot up each in turn then, Xbox One X first. The game only has a small smattering of battles in effect, but it's enough to get an impression of what the ballpark range is on each. And the fact is, X hardware typically sticks to 60fps, but with drops once you start adding Devil Breaker moves into the mix. That's where extra shaders and particle effects start introducing themselves, and the frame rate takes a tumble. Nothing too drastic based on the first battle, but if we move to the second, a hotel room congested with enemies, it starts to flare up a little more often.
Get out of my sight!
Overall, the rate of play on X is really strong in gameplay. The only real exception to this is that Goliath boss at the end. Everything is V-synced, but you're getting a constant wavering between 50 to 60fps, and sometimes under that down to near 40fps, which isn't quite where we want a mainline Devil May Cry to be. In all other aspects, performance is really good, but it's just this part that struggles. A lot of new elements make this battle exceptional in fairness. The fire shader inside the Goliath, and the falling geometry as we crumble through the building can't help. But if we're anticipating major bosses to match the scale of this one, something has to give. This is a demo of course. Possibly we're looking at an over-ambitious push for 4K resolution on X, and making it more flexible, dynamic, could even this out at 60fps again. It's certainly more aggressive than X's drops in Resident Evil 7, which largely held out at the maximum refresh. What's certainly clear is that the cutscene building up to the Goliath is quite a ways off the mark, and could probably benefit from a 30fps cap, that being the number it goes down to. It really wouldn't be the worst thing to see the RE engine target 30fps in moments where player input isn't needed, just to give it a chance to showcase its visuals. But as it stands, it's unlocked in this demo. So how about the regular Xbox One then? Well, this is where there is more work to do. 50 to 60fps is the range for even that opening battle. Even without a frame rate graph, that sticks out while playing. It does feel less smooth overall. And venturing deeper into that hotel segment, it's been pushed even further, more or less locking to 50fps with drops under. Now it's maybe expected that we'd see some drop off in performance, but it's much more noticeable moving to base hardware. The final test here is that boss battle, which inevitably gives the base model some serious challenges. The shaders and all the post effects hammer it pretty hard all the way through, and as you can see, it's lingering at 50 with plenty of drops well under that. It's not ideal, but then it is still very early code. Here's some food for thought in the meantime though. For perspective, Resident Evil 7 had a similar issue with Xbox One when targeting a native 1080p there too. Flashing back, it ran at 50 to 60fps and sometimes under, compared to the locked 60 on X. Perhaps it's down to being so ambitious on the resolution front, and dropping to something like 900p would pull it up to par. Devil May Cry 5 is a very different game in terms of what it's trying to achieve with its action. Rather than setting an atmosphere with dynamic lighting and post effects, timing those combos is an important part of gameplay, and so boosting the frame rate on Xbox One is more of an imperative here. Now there is one last curiosity here. That cutscene with the Goliath gives us an amazing benchmark for both consoles, rendering the same scene out with different bottlenecks on each system. So let's match them up and see what we've got. Initially watching base Xbox One versus X, the standard does have a better level of performance. It's not always extreme, but at times there's a 4 to 5 FPS advantage as we zoom in on Nero. Now, as the camera cuts away, the advantage can return to X, but overall, the base machine wins out. So what's going on? Well, in theory, since X has a different challenge entirely in quadrupling the pixel count, facing the more alpha-heavy elements of the screen could be stretching it a little harder. Also, bear in mind, it's using high-quality ambient occlusion and bloom too. It might explain why there is a difference. In either case, come launch, the fact is these scenes might need a 30fps cap rather than running unlocked. Crucially, actual gameplay sticks much closer to 60fps on X, based on this demo. It's just the cutscenes that show such a wide difference. That's the outlook on Devil May Cry 5 so far. Quite a bit of development time left, though the RE engine looks set for a successful return, and there'll be more to come in our final analysis on PS4 machines. Perhaps more imminently though, we have the Resident Evil 2 remake, sneaking in earlier in 2019, itself flaunting the RE engine with a completely different concept. Again, that's targeting 60fps, and so my hope is Capcom will have this performance issue locked down by then, notably on Xbox One for both games. Anyway, that's all I have time for today. If you did enjoy this early sneak peek at DMC5, do let us know with a like or even subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell for instant updates as any video lands, and to get the source file here, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net. But until next time, thanks for watching.